Welcome to the second episode of the Law series of In the Middle, hosted by Roy and Cedric. In this episode, they begin a discussion on the materials used to build the tabernacle, continuing to focus on the details in language and the ways that the exterior is meant to represent the interior. If you'd like to read along, reference passages are in the show notes, and we hope you enjoy this episode of In the Middle.
And interestingly enough, when I read the text, the first thing that came to mind, like yourself, because of course it's in the name of the Torah portion, offering.
Yeah.
And in my Christian lens, I was like, well, we take offering, and of course thinking
it's common.
Yes,
yeah.
We do it every week, a couple of times a week if you go to Bible study. And then I often was thinking of, well, even that is controversial. There are some within the Christian, particularly those that are deconstructing their faith at the moment, and they argue, well, that wasn't ever supposed to be about money and yada yada. I'm like, well, here you go. First thing you ask for is silver and gold, so throw that out the window.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the next thing, of course, is, well, what is it for? What's the purpose of this offering? And of course, what it was designed to do, out of this, we're going to be building the sanctuary of God. We're going to be creating the pillars and creating the curtains of the tabernacle and creating the table and it's covering the gold overlay and inlay that would actually be put inside of the Ark of the Covenant and the holies of holies and the plates and the bowls and the candlelight, all of those things that are supposed to be a part of this design that God has given Moses in a revelation are created here. In addition to that, the garments that the priests will wear. So there's a purpose for this offering. It's not just any old offering, and it's not just random in its application. Of course, that led me to the next thing. How many times did God ask the people for an offering when it was ever just random?
Right.
Never.
Right.
All of them had a purpose.
Yeah.
Every last sacrifice, every last offering, all of them had a purpose and an intent. And when viewed from that perspective, the commonality with which we attribute and behave and interact with offerings in our Christian proceedings is almost disrespectful.
Yeah.
Because if we don't treat it with the reverence that it's due, at its lowest level of purpose, when we're talking about a grain offering that's supposed to be just restoring relationship between two people, that's the least expensive offering that could be given. It is still maintaining the sanctity of community.
Yeah.
We should be far more reverential with how we view and do offering, both as an institution of Christianity, the church, and as believers.
Yeah.
And that was what I came away with as I was reading. When we were just talking about, in the holies of holies, there's this beautiful container, and it's got angels on the top of it, and their wings are spread upwards, and they're bent over, and the voice of God comes from above them. And when I was reading, they made this out of wood. Then they inlaid gold inside of it. Who gonna see that? Right.
Acacia wood, or shittim in the Hebrew.
Right.
Yeah.
And then put gold on the outside of it. And what that spoke to me was like worship.
Yeah.
This is because God wants it for no other reason.
Yeah.
That, when we were talking, you were describing that to me. It was like, what's the, why, the questions are, why did he want it that way? But he wanted it that way. That much we understood. If we didn't understand no other reason, because he wants it.
Yeah.
And it's in that, and giving him what he wants is worship. So at the end of the day, for me and my simplified thought process, it's literally worship and the symbolism of having gold on the inside of the Ark of the Covenant is that the worship shouldn't just be an outward showing,
Right.
but an
right.
inward. Because now we are the tabernacle.
Well, the further inward we go, the more gold there is involved.
Exactly.
I mean, if you think about just the lid on the ark is incredible. And I don't have the numbers in my head, but last night I kind of went through, I'm like, wait a minute, this is a lot of gold. This is a lot of gold in there. But it also speaks to the higher it goes up in value, the more in the hidden parts of the tabernacle that it is. As you work your way out, even the fact, oh my gosh, the ram skins. The ram skins is covering some serious embroidery on top of the tabernacle.
Yes.
Lion on one side, eagle on the other side, or cherubim is what it says in here. Tradition says that depending on the side of that fabric you were looking at, you got a different image. And then you're covering that with what? There's another sheet that covers up, like you can see on the drawings I looked at, which is tradition, but you can see a little bit at the bottom, you can kind of see it leak. But the more valuable, the more precious, the more creative by the artisans that made it, the more buried down it is. I don't want to say obscurity, but hidden.
Yes.
It's covered. So yeah, it absolutely talks about if we're to, because the rabbis would say that this is both a prototype of life, a prototype of the universe, a prototype of the person. So if we can say that our heart is the holy of holy, then we know what has to be the most pure. We know what should be given the most amount of time to making it right and the most valuable. Because we've got silver for the common areas that you can readily see, and then you've got skins covering that. And of course, the very outer skin is still beautiful, that tachash skin.
Right.
But underneath that, it's like a protective lining, to cover all these amazing things up. And it's like, what is the point if you're just going to cover it? Why all this embroidery on the outside of the tabernacle if you're just going to cover it with a linen sheet, basically?
Right.
But but it speaks of modesty too.
But the linen sheet in and of itself, because I was looking up the symbolism of that, right?
Yeah.
Because I was like, what? Why this linen? Come to find out, it was woven with meticulous care and represented righteousness and moral purity.
Yeah.
So
another word for modesty.
Exactly, in that humility and everything.
Yes.
So on the inside, where the human eye sees it, is this symbol for purity and righteousness that's supposed to be our effort.
Yeah.
Then behind that is this red skin that has been embroidered and dyed red.
Yeah.
And I think they used like bloods from insects or whatever. So that meant that there was a lot of work that went to producing this dye, a lot of work that went into producing the dye. And then it's embroidered with these beautiful, beautiful artwork. And then outside of that, there's an animal that only existed for the purpose of creating the tabernacle, because that's how God do.
Yeah.
And it was, and described as iridescent, like, oh my God. So all of these layers of amazing beauty, but the thing that represented our work was the thing we saw when we entered into this place. Everything else was because God wanted it, because he knew it and he understood it. It was his vision. And it's like, our work, then worship, then worship. Then his provision, this material he provides that that doesn't exist anywhere else, and that those animals could no more be found after that was created.
Yeah.
Like, all of this is so God. It's like, wow.
So what do you remember? Because that one covering or skin you're talking about is the tachash. What do you remember? The lore on this?
That specifically, it only existed for the purpose of creating that tabernacle covering.
Yeah.
That was it. They took the animals, they made them, and then there was nothing.
It's the one skin on the tabernacle that you don't have to augment. So traditionally, and I'm reading Rashi here, tachash is a type of animal that it existed only at that time. So the tradition is there wasn't a bunch of these tachashim running around, but whenever they needed one for the tabernacle, one would show up. Nobody truly knows what this animal is. Right. Nobody knows. Onkelos I'm not even going to try to read that one, but it's an animal that rejoices and take pride in its colors. What does that mean? Think of a peacock.
Right.
You know, when the male bird, the ones that have the colorful plume or whatever, they start strutting, that it would be that kind of thing. But these stripes, which also reminds me of the striped robe of Joseph as well, you know, that he was given this incredible multicolored robe. It's reminiscent of that, but the fact that it has all these colors, so they didn't have to necessarily dye it or do this to it or tan it or to make it ready. It was ready already, straight off of the animal, so that it comes beautiful enough. I've read so much about tachash that it doesn't even matter anymore, because one of them is a unicorn of the sea. Right. One's a unicorn of the sea. But I remember years ago reading, basically there's one obscure teaching, a little obscure, that it's not so much that the animal was so ambiguous that it didn't exist except for that one time a year, but that it wasn't kosher the rest of the time. And that's one rabbi, and now it's been so long ago, it was a credible story, as far as from a credible rabbi, I should say. Right. But that under certain conditions it was kosher, and under most conditions that it wasn't. So then in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, maybe it's an ocean creature, and then when it comes on land, it's kosher, but unkosher while in the whatever. But at any rate, it arrived at that one time. But it really translate in many ways to us. The mysterious side of it is let's say the flesh of man. It's a representation of that. I mean, all of the tabernacle kind of is, in so much that we see the modesty of the things that are considered most beautiful are covered with layers and layers, and it kind of goes down, with the exception of this tachash that I believe is on the outer layer. Yeah. But it's very reminiscent of our own flesh. You know, if you think of the beauty of, and we're taught this, the beauty of a woman. And of course, we even have Brit Hadashah scripture. It talks about modesty and kind of, you know, covering that up a bit. It's that type of story, not that what we cover that we're ashamed of or that God is ashamed of. Now, we know Adam and Eve for a little while felt naked and had to cover it, but in their glory, they didn't. Right. In their glory, they were not covered, and this was not an issue. Only after the fall, it was covered. And I don't know if you can see, there's a play on these words. So this is the skin of the tachash. This is tachash right here, techashim, so it's plural, and it's veil wrote. And I'm jumping, this Torah portion for me always ties to here. Okay, Genesis 2:25. Let me pull that up real quick. So there's a reason why I wanted to point out the first three letters, not the first three letters. Every Hebrew word is made up. This isn't 100%, but it's like 99.9% of three letters. When you're seeing the same three letters together reoccur, they're related. And what's interesting with this one is also after a while, okay, that same three, another letter gets added, and now it's kind of this train of thought. And so for me, the skin of tachash is very much the same as the skin of Adam and Eve. But we have, another thing, so we talked about Terumah, and I don't know if you can see this, it's here. So the three letters that make up the word are the resh, the vav, and the mem. Okay, so now if I go to Genesis 2:25, now they were both, okay, this is the English, now they're talking about Adam and Eve. Now they were both naked, the man and his wife, but they were not ashamed. And so once again, real quick, I'm going to show you so this is it in the Hebrew. Can you see that okay?
Yeah.
All right. So now let's go to this word naked. Let me find it over here. Right here. So the three letters make up the room of Terumah, the resh, the vav, the mem, the resh, the vav, the mem. This is the same word. Rumim. Rumim is plural, so im is plural. It's room. So that room is to rise, to be lifted up, but also can be deception. Or what was the other one I had? To be deceived. Now we look at this tachash, it's the word for skin, and the difference is the ein. So there's an ein added, and the word for, okay, so this word is ve'orot, which is here, the ein, vav, resh. So what we're missing now is the mem. So it's moving over. Now, if you remember from Hebrews, the Hebrew class we did, the ein contains a bit of divinity to it. It speaks of the supernatural, so does the aleph. So the Hebrew word for skin is or, the Hebrew word for light is or, but the skin has the ein, light has the aleph. And so all of this in me gets tied together. You've got this nakedness, a skin, what would you call it? The uncovered skin, I guess is what you would refer to it as, being the same word as this offering, tied into the skins of the tachash, the skins of the ram, and the light. And so that tachash skin represents, to me, a form of glory. Because we went through all of these levels, and we started with our innermost being. Right. And then our innermost being is covered with something quite exceptional, quite beautiful. Right. And then we cover it in modesty. And then there's another skin on top of that. And it really speaks to kavod, or kavod is Hebrew for, it's kind of a generic word. I don't really like it, but glory. So if you talk about the glory of the Lord, no one knows what glory means. What does kavod mean? It's because we can't express what it is. We have a word like glory. Right. And it's really different than the essence of. That's the Hebrew word for bones. But it's like this tachash is covering. Now this is odd to say because first of all, it's not proper to say or appropriate because God's in the tabernacle. You can't in good conscience say that tachash is the glory of the tabernacle when God is sitting in the Holy of Holies. But He's covered. He's covered. Right. And so what is within us, assuming that our innermost being has that Holy of Holies where the presence of the Almighty lives, and then we're covered with quite nice things, but then covered that with modesty, and then there's a glory that goes on out of us. So in some weird way, this skin on the outside is a direct representation of what's going on the inside. And the funny thing is I've been married for... she's 32 years. And every now and again, I like to check in with my wife and make sure she's like, you ain't going to leave me or, we're good. All right. But the funny thing is, the reason being is as I get to know her more and more, you begin to see when you look at one of my first, let me back up here. When we first got married, we didn't do so well. First 10 years, we didn't do so well. Now, we're both trying to walk with the Lord, but we're not doing well with one another. And so one of the things I remember praying was, help me to see her the way you see her. Because once we got married, there's a battle of wills, and she has a very strong personality. And I'm one of those guys that don't like to be handled, And so it was a battle of the wills, but whenever I asked the Lord to show me her the way He saw her, then life changed. And so the beauty of that which is my wife has very little to do with how her hair is done, how she did her makeup, how much she weighs, or I guess I'm not even supposed to say that, but, or any of those things. It's when you can see the innermost being of someone and you understand their true nature. Right. So my eyes at 30 years of marriage doesn't really know the difference anymore between the inner person and the outer person because it's a package deal. So I remember one time when I was telling her, oh, you're so beautiful. She's like, I'm not all that. I'm like, well, to me you are. The way I see you, you're all that and a little bit extra, Right. So it's this tying of light, skin, all of these layers, but in a way that's proper. And so when we read through all these rules of the way it's got to be done, that's where the debate takes place. That's where the debate between Jew and or Messianic Jew and Christian takes place. Are all these things necessary to purify, to sanctify in this moment in time? And I kick that off to you because that's on your side of I don't have an issue with it. on my, I mean, as far as I'd say me and my people versus you and your people, not being African-American, but Christian people.
Right.
Yeah.
So from the perspective of a Christian, and then my study of all those materials and their location within the tabernacle, to me, the tabernacle, after studying this a lot more in depth than I have previously studied it, quite honestly, because I've previously looked at the material. And because I'm wired the way I'm wired, I'm a very my imagination is very visual.
Yeah.
And so when I read, I'm picturing everything in my mind, and it's beautiful and it's amazing and it's wonderful and all these things, and it's easy for me to get distracted there.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because it's so,
you get lost in it
quick. It's so much going on, but it's it's almost like a spiritual architecture.
Yes.
Okay, so
that's exactly what it is. That's the best way to say that too.
That's how I see it now after this study. Before it was just like, this is beautiful, this is wonderful. It represents the work of redemption, and represents Christ. He's in so many layers of this. He's so wonderful, and it's beautiful, and it's the glory of God. It's all, and not that it isn't those things, but when you break things down to where they literally are located in the purpose of them. Why the silver? Why was the silver the foundation, the base of so many elements? And then what did that represent? That redemptive thing. So the foundation, the base of all of these things within the tent was redemption. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And then the gold, and where the gold's located, and how that is kind of the presence of God, or the glory of God manifested. And then, but when we out there doing the transaction between the people and God, it's bronze.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What is that, and what does that represent? And so of course that was judgment and purification, which is what was happening in that space. So, everything has a place and
the least value
perfect
of the three metals. So you could say far more common.
Absolutely.
Where every man lives, kind of a thing.
Exactly. And a more communal material because of that, right? Which, of course, that is the place where we're having relationships. So it makes perfect sense that is what's going on in that space. It's reflective. It's, transactional. It's relational. It's all of that is happening at that place, where we are working out our sin, but it's got to be distant from God, because he don't play with sin like that, and he don't tolerate.
No, because we're talking about fire out here.
Exactly.
I mean, when the tabernacle's inaugurated, it is fire from heaven that quite literally licks up the offering, and we already know two people that got too close to that process and got licked up, right along with it.
Exactly. So we know it's like, no, we can't bring the mess in to him. We have to work that out here.
Yeah.
And once we've worked that out, then our representative brings our things in before God.
Yeah.
And he is clean. He's flawless, spotless. He's wearing the garb that is made out of that linen that we were talking about earlier. That's the same stuff that the interior of the tabernacle is lined with. He looks like he belongs there.
Yeah.
Right? The jewels and the and the thummim and the turban and all of the things that he is in, that God has decided is necessary for him to be wearing when he enters into that space, after he is consecrated and cleansed himself properly and gone through the process of preparation to be in there. And then looking at the colors, and the blues and the reds and the purples, and what they were the represented.
Is it three colors? It's three colors, right?
Like purple, scarlet, and blue.
Yeah.
Right. So and what they represented, God's boundless authority, and royalty, and messianic promise, and sacrifice and atonement, and all of these things represented by the colors that God chose.
Yeah.
Everything purposeful, intentional, and placed meticulously. everything. By the time we get to the, he even is specific about, hey, and this is the oil you're gonna use. Everything is specific and meticulous. So, from my perspective, after studying it and actually slowing down and paying attention and looking at where things are and what the purpose of those things is, absolutely everything is necessary.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of In the Middle. Like and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast to support the show.